Now, before we go any further, while everyone's clearing out and getting quiet, I'd like to show you something. This was given to me this morning. In fact, I found it propped up against my mirror, and so they knew I'd find it. And I just don't know how to introduce this. I have to say that it comes from the Buddhists of the World Unite department. And here it is, an advertisement for samsara. You found it, and it's sold at Hex. I just don't know what to say. I think when it gets down to this point, we have to get serious. For those of you that are not aware of this, and it looks very pretty too. I think samsara is very pretty. Looks great in red, and there it is. But anyway, I just don't know what to say about this. I just love this. I love this. I would like to have this framed. In fact, I would like to have 2 copies of this so that we could frame one side and the other, because I think this is such an indication of our time here. You have to listen to what it says about samsara. First of all, for those of you that are not aware of what samsara means, according to the Buddhist teaching, it's the Sanskrit word for the cycle of death and rebirth, the cycle of suffering. And samsara, it's considered that we are wandering in samsara endlessly, in a very confused state, in a very deluded state, due to the belief in self-nature as being inherently real, due to our ego clinging and our suffering and our desire. And so samsara is actually the realm of suffering, and it is almost impossible. It is impossible to get out of unless one actually follows a path that is given to us by an enlightened being, and that can lead to enlightenment. Enlightenment is, in fact, the only cure for samsara. But that's not how they say it in this commercial. Here, samsara is introduced as a sense of serenity. You be the judge. I don't think so. Okay, samsara, a sense of serenity. A new and rare fragrance by, how do you pronounce that, Guerlain? Huh? Guerlain. You don't use this stuff, do you? Please, I don't even want to smell it. By Guerlain. Right, that was the right thing to say. Where sandalwood and jasmine reign. Do they reign in samsara? Is that what's happening? Rich and lingering, subtle yet persistent. You're right about that. To touch the innermost senses, also correct. Samsara, a timeless fulfillment. Isn't that a scream? I love this. I have to get it. I don't know what magazine this came from, and I don't even know who left it for me. But I just have to have another one, and we have to frame both sides. And we, pardon?
Cosmopolitan, I believe. I haven't seen that.
Thank you, Richard. That's Richard Ader, for those of you that need to see this video. It was now extremely red. Richard, they say that everybody's famous for 15 minutes. This is your time. You will go down in history as being the tallest reader of Cosmopolitan in the world. And you were there. Well, we're having a really good time. I love this. I just think this is great. I think this is great. I think we really ought to frame this. We ought to put it on a poster, and we ought to have the title, From the Buddhists of the World Unite Department. Let's get it together. Now, I have something I would like to read to you. I hope I have the right thing. Yes. This is something that has brought me great joy. And I'm really sorry that the older children were not here today, because this is a letter that was written to me by one of our older children, well, medium older children, who's really getting the big picture. And it leads me right into what I would like to talk about today. What I would like to talk about is how we as adults don't get the big picture. But this little guy really gets the big picture. Try to listen to this carefully. Realize that this comes from a 7-year-old mind. It is a mind that's being trained. We do spend some time training our kids here. In fact, we put a lot of energy into them. And I think this makes me happy to know that it's beginning to pay off. What is it about children that lets them receive knowledge in such a direct way without all their preconceived notions, so that they can really use it, so that it can really sink into their minds? What is it about them? Is it their lack of training in the things that argue with what we ought to be learning at this point? I really don't know. Is it just the simplicity of their perception? I don't know what it is, but this is from a 7-year-old boy. And please listen very carefully. Try to hear for yourself what's understood here and how different it is from our understanding in terms of how we perceive our spiritual path and the goal. Dear Jetsunma, this is just a thought that he had, and he made his dad write it down. It's like a bottomless pit of samsara gunk, and you're sinking down in black gunk. Then when you become enlightened, there forms into a bottom. This is 7-year-old language. There forms into a bottom. Then the bottom starts to float up to the top. Then you climb out, and then the bottom disappears. The clear water starts to turn back into someone else's black gunk. When everybody is enlightened, the water stays clear. There's a bottom forever, and everyone is happy. Does anyone hear how awesome that is? That's real teaching in itself. And I'm deeply appreciative of the level of understanding that this little boy has. The fact that he's thinking about things like this is incredible. But the fact that he understands in the way that this child clearly understands the goal is beyond incredible. It's awesome. I can't think of what this means. Because the experience that I have primarily, and maybe unfortunately, is with the adults here in our Sangha, the very adults that have received training for a very long time. And we still have the idea that we are traveling on a path that has a real solid distance to it. That we're really going from here to there. And that somehow, even though we say we realize the goal is enlightenment, and there's no distance between here and enlightenment, in our minds, we're going from here to there. Wherever it is we're going, we ain't at it yet. We think in terms of linear development and of distance. And we think of enlightenment as being something, some real thing that's out there, a state that we will experience when we get it. Like a place or a change. Some kind of substance that we can move closer to. And it causes us to practice our path in very strange ways. It causes us, for instance, to try to copy enlightenment. We all do it. You know we do. We all try to act spiritual, or we try to conceptualize what spirituality or depth might look like, and we try to emulate that behavior. We have an idea as to what it looks like, and it's different with everyone, so everyone's acting different. But we all have something that we try to act like. We try to copy or fabricate meaningful experiences, acting like enlightenment, a little bit like kids trying on their daddy's clothes. But this little kid understands that there's no distance, that that's not what's happening at all. He understands something quite extraordinary. He understands that enlightenment, which is the fruit of the path, the goal, is completely inseparable from the base or the underlying nature, that which is established, that which is, in a sense, the starting point, that which is the truth. We might understand that in words, we might understand that in theory, but when it comes down to our practice, we don't understand that. We do not understand that the goal of the path is the same as the base nature. We try to contrive a distance, we try to build something that isn't there. We gather together virtuous activity and practice as though once we have so many pieces of it, then suddenly we'll have enough. And we think of it very much the same as attaining mastery. Like, if we learn this fact, and this technique, and this method, and then we have this virtue, and then we get this insight, then we have this experience, we begin to collect and collect and collect and collect, and pretty soon we've collected so many things, we kind of keep waiting for the biggie. We keep waiting for something to happen according to how much we've collected. And we have this sort of subtle, unconscious tendency to measure things. How much have I got now? What's in the bank? I want to see my bank statement. You know, where is it? How much have I done? How much do I have at this point? Thinking that that accumulation brings us closer to enlightenment. We all do that, and we don't realize how different that is from the understanding this child has. Because the understanding this child has is that the nature is established in its purity, changeless. No beginning, no end. There is nothing that we will do in our practice. There is nothing that we will do in our work, not under any condition, that will cause us to be any different than what we are now. Well, I'm sorry, let me take that back. That will cause our nature to be any different than what it is now. It doesn't get any bigger. It doesn't get any stronger. What changes is the perception. Our perception. And it changes because the perception is the extension of our own confusion. And that's the thing we don't get. We keep trying to manipulate our environment and to change its structure. We keep saying, well, yeah, I understand this perceptual stuff and I understand about this ego clinging, but let's see if I can just move this over here and move this over there and change this thing and bring this down and move that up. Then I'll work with that for a little while and see if that helps. But actually, it doesn't help because that's not what the problem is. The problem is always in our perception, and our perception is a direct extension, actually a function of our own confused ego clinging and all of the misconceptualization that comes from that. Our perception is a reflection of that. So if we see a situation in a certain way, we tend to think that really the situation is that way and it's really out there. We might try to be spiritual and say, oh, what has that to teach me? What do I have to learn from that? Or what relationship do I have with that? Or how can I act toward that situation in a spiritual way? But in fact, Lord Buddha teaches us that that doesn't get us any closer to enlightenment at all. It's just something to do. Really, when we look at a situation that is disturbing or traumatic to us in some way, what we have to recognize is that that perceptual phenomena, that event, is an expression or actually an extension of our own inner confusion. And there are never any exceptions. There are no exceptions to that. That due to our ego clinging, due to our fixation on self-nature as being inherently real, and the continuation or elaboration of that fixation to the degree that all phenomena seems inherently real, and all relationships between self and phenomena seem inherently real, and all relationships between phenomena and phenomena seem inherently real, due to that entire process of fixation, clinging, elaboration, which are all a result of the deluded experience of ego. Due to that, we are experiencing as we do. And so there's really not much benefit in changing anything on the outside if nothing on the inside is changed. Now, on the other hand, we have to live and move and have our being. I mean, there's no point in meditating on the emptiness of the phenomena and then walking into a car. I mean, that would be pretty stupid. One has to act in accordance with the rules of the game. One has to act in accordance with the environment that we find ourselves in. But then one also has to take responsibility for constantly weaning oneself away from fixation. Through one's practice, one has to realize the nature of phenomena, the inherently empty nature of phenomena. One has to realize the inherently empty nature of ego. One has to realize it to the degree that one begins to create a sense of spaciousness in the mind. And through that practice, through the intensity of one's practice, phenomena does in fact change. The circumstances of our lives do in fact change. When the mind becomes less confused, we become more spacious, more aware of our own true nature. And eventually, through the intensity of our practice, we will have a taste, a direct taste of that nature. Of course, that may be somewhat down the road, but that direct taste is such that it brings about a kind of knowing that can't be gotten in any other way. And having tasted that nature directly, one becomes less confused, completely and utterly less confused. I don't know if I've phrased that correctly, but I think you understand what I'm saying. The change is so dramatic. The confusion is so much less. And what begins to happen then is that one is less fixated. There is simply more space. One isn't constantly engaged in the reactive mode, the compulsive, knee-jerk reactive mode that we are all engaged in. And we are all engaged in that reactive mode. To the degree that there's really no space, our reaction is so quick and so automatic and so dramatic that we have no taste of the space, of the pristine nature that is our nature. So hard to understand, and yet so simply and completely there. For according to the teachings, there are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas without number on every molecule in the space in front of us, right at this moment. Why don't we believe that? Because we can't see it. But do we go a little further and understand why it is that we can't see it? We only understand that we don't see it, and we think that either means that they're there or they're not there. That's the only way we can understand seeing or not seeing something. It's either there or it's not there. But what we don't understand is that the same lack of ability to see the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas without number on every molecule in the space in front of us, and they are there, according to the teachings, according to those who have the perception to be able to see that it's so. The same inability that we have that prevents us from seeing the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas without number. That same inability is what prevents us from recognizing our own nature. To the degree that that nature can be recognized, it is recognized. It is recognized as our own nature. It is recognized in its pristine essence. It is recognized as being Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the space in front of us. And it is recognized as being inseparable, without distance. And it is only recognized when one's perception is pure, is cleared up. The Buddha laid down the path. The Buddha said that in order for that to happen, one must attain the egoless state. One must also purify the mind through virtuous activity. And from the Vajrayana point of view, one must attain pure view, allowing one's mind to abide spontaneously in the primordial wisdom state, in a stable and completely balanced way, to abide in suchness. In that state, the five senses don't act as they do now for us. They are the five celestial wisdoms. They view spaciousness. They view essence. They view suchness. They remain stable, relaxed and effortless, spacious within the primordial wisdom nature. You might have known, you might have recognized immediately that our five senses don't do that, not as they are now. They talk to us constantly about relativity. This water is cold. It's cold because I'm warm. I can tell it's cold because relative to me it's colder. This grain of rice is very small. How do I know it's small? Because it's much smaller than me. It's not small to an ant, though. That's what our five senses are telling us. And we believe them. Without doubt, we believe them. We believe them and we can't talk ourselves out of it. And it's because they are a direct extension of our inner confusion. That is why it's so important to follow such a pristine path, to practice such a pure and involved or complicated technology, and to practice it in a very exacting way. In practicing as the enlightened ones who have achieved enlightenment, the great Buddhas who have appeared throughout time, cyclically to give us the path, have practiced in doing as they do, in purifying our ego clinging, in purifying our selfish activity, which is an extension of that ego clinging, in purifying our limited, contrived view and confusion by attaining through stabilizing the mind the pure view of pristine cognition, then we too will be able to see Buddhas and Bodhisattvas without number appearing to us in a very accessible form. Millions of them on our very fingertips. And at that time, we will also know our nature, and will see that spaciousness to be inseparable and uncontrived. Never distant, never that. Never changed. so utterly simple in that moment of pure cognition, when all the effortfulness of contrivance simply drops away. The contrivance that we are so dynamically engaged in now. So simple, that moment of pure cognition, and yet so hard to understand when all we see is the fixation on ego. In conclusion, having read this wonderful note from this little boy, I'd like to read it again. I would like you to really listen to this and see if you can hear it better this time after we've had this little talk. And see if from that point and from what he's saying, and maybe from what I'm saying, certainly from what the Buddha's saying, you can find a way to take responsibility for your own perception. Take responsibility for realizing that your experience is a confused one. Our experience is a confused one. And that the antidote to that confusion is to attain the egoless state. It has been said again and again and again, and there's never any exception. It's like a bottomless pit of samsara gunk, and you're sinking down in black gunk. Then when you become enlightened, there forms into a bottom. Then the bottom starts to float up to the top. Then you climb out, and then the bottom disappears. The clear water starts to turn back into someone else's black gunk. When everybody is enlightened, the water stays clear. There's a bottom forever, and everyone is happy. Thank you very much for listening to that. And I really thank our junior gurus, wherever they are. Nanda.